Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Robert Smart here and Brandon Tankott, and you here would navigate the web. Brandon, how you doing, man?
Great in yourself, Robert. It's good to be back here for I think our second episode of the full video on series, if we're going to call it that. But yeah, it's good to be back, man.
Yeah, man. I've been editing the other video, and so it's been quite an interesting journey trying to get this thing to work, which will be out soon. But today's topic is I guess as designers, we sometimes struggle with this kind of thing, right? And so today I thought we can chat about it. It's called why every designer needs to learn to sell. That is the topic that we want to be focusing on today. And I think it's important, Brandon, because you've got 20 plus years in the industry and you know how super important it is for us to sell, right? For every designer to sell, because if you don't sell, you don't get working, you don't get paid, you don't know how to survive, So maybe let's chat about it, Brandon.
Yeah, I think it's exactly like you said. It's sales is a survival skill, but it's also part of the nature of what you're doing and producing, also on behalf of your client. So everyone wants to look good. Why? Because generally they're selling or presenting something of themselves or for themselves or of their company, and then they need a designer to make that look good. So intrinsically in what we do in designing, we're creating an image or projecting something out onto the world the way we want people to see it, right? Or the way we want our clients to perceive the way it really is. And a lot of times that's driven by sales, so, or the intention to make sales, or the intention to get more eyeballs in order to make sales, or to clean up the brand so that everything is aligned so that the customers can recognize the brand. Why? To make sales. So I think a part of being a designer, I don't think design would have existed in a commercial aspect if it wasn't for, you know, advertising, and advertising is there to drive sales again. So, I think trying to avoid sales as a designer, you need to just kind of take a re-look at what you do for your career and the role you play in the bigger machine of marketing and sales and business operations, and because that's really what it is. So when we learning design, we're learning an aspect of sales. And I think that's important. And then how we design our portfolios, how we design our services or our offerings to our clients that we're servicing is, that's obviously how we sell ourselves, which is, the bread and the butter behind our businesses and our livelihoods. But at the same time, it's intrinsic to also sell to ourselves in terms of what we're doing and being confident with where we are. So sales is so diverse and complex as a designer because we're dealing with the visual side, but also emotional elements. Red means and green means, and why do we use these colors? So yeah, man, I think it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, I think when I think about sales, I remember starting out as a freelancer the first time, and I used to hate sales. I used to hate sales because it meant me being an introvert. I had to come out of my comfort zone, right, and go and network with people and speak about things and about their businesses, and it's quite daunting, right? It's like, I mean, I don't know about you.
Very,
You
very
had a
young. Yeah, and it was tough. I think clammy hands is probably the best way to sum it up. Nervous anxiety with clammy hands and a stuttering voice, and I still get that to this day. I think it's hard sometimes when you approach a room of people who are all, for example, doctors. And you're just a web designer, and you think all of a sudden these people have got much more than you, and they know more than you, and they're on this higher pedestal, and whatever else. So you feel, and part of you feels like maybe a little bit intimidated or nervous, or it's a group of lawyers, or so. I've had it many times in my career. But when you're young, it's especially difficult. I think for me it was hard because I started out young, like you pointed out, and in those days there wasn't as many internet web design businesses as there are now. I had it, selling into an industry where people were like, "Oh, this internet thing is like, do I really need a website?" Versus nowadays, well, people don't even question that. So I come from a generation where the internet was just starting, companies were just starting to invest in websites, and obviously selling those websites was a lot easier in some respects. but also a lot harder because of my age and because of the,
Mm.
people don't know what they know now about the technology. So it took a lot of convincing and sitting people down and actually proving to them that my age is not a barrier, that the offering that we're doing, or what we can do for them in the sale, focusing on the benefits of having a website, all those things we started very, very early, and on the pain points of why they should have one versus their competitors. And that did very well. I mean, we were very successful in sales, but it didn't always last because we realized that, intrinsically, sales also needs to go with a why. So why you do something is very important. And if you're just selling, but you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, you find that a lot of your efforts kind of just dispel very, very quickly, or it feels like there's a hole in the bucket, and the more you fill in, the more it runs out. Having a solid intention and why young is something I learned quickly. Otherwise, you just sell anything. Especially when you get a knack for it, then you're just selling yourself into projects, for example, that you shouldn't be doing because you don't know why you're doing what you're doing.
Exactly. I mean, I'm just thinking now that like one of the things that I've had to learn is that when you sell, it's probably best to come up with a list of questions, right? A list of questions that you can ask. Like I have a script, right? And on that script, I have a bunch of questions that I ask, like why this, why that, why now, right? There's a guy by the name of his name seems to have skipped me my mind now, but he goes in to say that you need to ask the why questions, right? Why do you think
Are you talking
why is
about Simon Sinek? Is that the
no,
name you were
not
looking
him,
for?
not
No,
Simon.
no, no.
Not Simon Sinek, but it's another guy that I follow, and he educates you into to asking certain questions about why questions, like why now, why this project, why this platform, because you want to get an understanding of the client's problems, right? And so sometimes when you don't ask these questions, you won't understand, because I don't know about you, but I have a tendency sometimes to just go with it instead of and whenever I do that, then I shoot myself in the foot, you know. And
100%.
so the more questions you ask, the more it will help you when you have to prepare a proposal, right? I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think it's part of also getting your scope of work done. So, in creative and what we're doing as designers, we're selling billables and creative. So the more you can flesh out that scope of work, the more you're ensuring your work with the clients. And the bigger your
Mm,
budgets, the more you can earn. So definitely spending time and asking questions to prompt yeah, buying decisions that your client may not even have known that they wanted. So for example, if they approach you to design a logo, a very simple question would be like, oh, now that you've got your logo, do you need a business card? Or are you going to be using this logo in an advert? Can I design the advert for you?
mm,
So that's just obviously quick parallel, points that you can ask the client. But obviously, in our game in digital, it's a lot more complex. So one question could open up a whole new scope of thinking for your client, and also potentially stop them from spending money where they shouldn't be spending money. And
mm. That's
and
right.
that is in the digital world is just as important. So you want to sell, like you said, to where your client's needs and pains are, and kind of meet them where they are. But what you don't want to do is sell them snake's oil or digital things that, it's just an upsell on an upsell on an upsell, but they actually don't need it. You're enriching yourself, but their expense. That type of selling, it works for some, and obviously it's becoming quite prevalent in the SaaS world, almost like a predatory sales tactics in terms of package pricing and double billing and those type of things, which we're noticing as designers because we use all these tools on behalf of our clients. But I think in digital, it's important to ask those questions, get a clear scope of work, and then match it to the reality of where your client's at. I think that avoids a lot of future pains. And then also, like I said, you don't want to go down rabbit holes where you don't belong, because at the end of the project, you normally end up, you're exhausted, the client's probably stressed out and unhappy because, you've gone down this trajectory what they didn't need to be involved in. And then everyone's kind of like, what do we do this for? So, part of selling the clients is also not just selling them, but listening to them. Like you mentioned, listening, asking questions,
Mm.
understanding what they need to do. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so the guy I was thinking of, his name is Jonathan Stark, right? And exactly what you were saying. So you kind of ask the questions in order to listen. You have to listen very carefully. Let the client talk a lot, talk about the project. So I have a tendency. Just some of the questions I like to ask is, how long has your business been around? How has the business performed over the last 12 months? What are the biggest problems you are facing in your business right now? So that might not be relevant to the design project, but it is something to get a broader overview of the actual business, because sometimes, right, um, I mean, as designers, we shouldn't just be designing. Let's
Mm,
face it, a lot of designers are there just to design. We are there as service providers to help elevate the clients, whether if it's a website or whether it's a product. We are there to help them grow their business, right? And so for me to get an understanding of what they are struggling with inside the business will actually help, when it comes to me strategizing for doing their marketing strategy or doing their website strategy or whatever the case might be. So I think it's important to ask those why questions, because a lot of times it will help you to win the business.
agreed. And I think it's also not just a skill for business, as designers. Once you start getting into the habit of doing that, I had a mentor that always used to teach us in his seminars, it's not about you, it's all about them. And it's something that's echoed and
Yeah.
bounced around in my head for a long time because I have the tendency to talk a lot, a tendency not to always listen. I think I know a lot more than I do, and that can get you into trouble, and you've got to catch yourself. So coming up with these little rhymes on being reflective and knowing your personality, your character is important. So that you have this little tool in your head or in your tool bag like I do, and like it's not about me, it's all about them. It's not about me, it's all about them. And then when I go into the meeting, I ask the questions not about me, but all about them. And it changes the whole
Yeah.
tone of the meeting, and everyone likes to talk about themselves. This is why I have that little
Exactly.
rhyme.
Exactly.
Everyone likes to do it. Everyone likes to share what they're excited about. Everyone likes to share their values. And, it's hard sometimes to keep quiet, but it's a human skill. It's a growth skill that the more you practice, the more it'll improve other areas of your life too. You'll find maybe the relationship with your children will start getting a bit better. The relationship with your wife will get a bit better. With your colleagues around the water cooler at work, will start improving because you're taking the time with intention to listen. The flip side of that's just the first step, of course, is just listening. Passive listening or attentive listening, and then active listening. They're all different things. Active listening is when you're participating in the listening in order to take action. So that's when, if you've got a child, you'll know this. When you say, "Listen to me," what are you saying to them? You're not saying to them, "Listen." You're asking them to do and follow your instruction. So now, if you understand that device in terms of sales, when you get your client to listen to you, then they're following your instruction with trust and they're believing in what you're selling them. And that's why it's very important to sell them what they need and not just what you want to make money from. Because if you get that balance correct, your clients will listen to you and you will be able to listen to them with the understanding of what they need. And that just changes the sales dynamic completely. You won't be pitching the whole time and convincing. You'll be providing value and a trusted service, which becomes part and integral in what they offer. And I think, that's important. So in the journey of being an entrepreneur, you can't forget that it's going to develop you. And a lot of the soft skills that you need to sell are interpersonal skills. They
Mm.
listening, talking, communication skills. So no, it's a fascinating journey.
Yeah, yeah, and just based on what you were saying now about value, firstly, designers try and develop a skill, and that is listening. Right, practice that at home, practice that at work, practice that wherever you go. Ask questions and then just listen, listen, listen. I think that's a skill every designer needs to develop, because sometimes we also like to. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I like to talk about myself a lot of times, But I've learned over the years that, while you are listening, also try and offer value, like you were saying, right? So in meetings, I tend to offer value while I'm talking to clients. Maybe I go before the meeting, I go through their website, and then I pick up something. And then when we talk during the meeting, I will say, listen, I'm not sure if you're aware, but I picked this up on your website. You should probably look into it. And so I try and drop little chunks of value, just so that they can come back to me, right, and say, now, Rob, I really like how you have attention to detail, or you can pick up things. And so we're looking for someone with that kind of specific skill that can help us. But at the end of the day, asking the right questions will definitely help you build that rapport with the client, because that's quite important. And I think that's something super important, Brandon, because a lot of
100%.
times people don't tend to build the rapport. I struggle in the beginning, as a designer. You just go straight into talking about the problems, talking about the project. But I've learned that just take that, 5 minutes or so, talk about, build up the rapport, talk about, the weather, where they're from. I like to ask them where they're from. And so, because there are certain countries I would like to travel to one day. And so I like to, because we now, with this whole remote first kind of world, we can be everywhere. So or we meet and deal with people from all around the world. And building rapport is super important for me, because that just sets the tone.
That's it. I mean, setting the tone, like you said, you're building the rapport, you're building a relationship, and that takes communication. And it takes, I think one of the biggest skills you can build in terms of sales as a designer is the skill of anticipation and an awareness of what's coming next. It's the imagine, if you're courting your wife or you're courting your future husband, you kind of know in the terms of your wife, you want to open the door for her before she gets to the door. So you need to anticipate the next move and move in action in accordance to where the person is and where they need to be. And when you meet them there, they're like, oh, wow, you opened the door for me. That's so nice of you. Thank you. So, that builds trust and it builds that understanding that you're on the journey together. And that rapport helps, obviously fuel the communication and also, creates the synergy that you need in order to build a dynamic team. So I think anticipating what your client needs before they even know they need it is, a very important skill in sales. So being able to pick up the phone call and going, I see at the end of this quarter, so and so is happening. I was thinking of you, and I think it would be great if in our next strategy call, we go over the following analytics. They're that way. Susie and Sarah and John will be able to get ready for this presentation. And I've done some of the homework for you already. And the client's like, oh, wow, I didn't even know that deadline was coming at the end of the quarter. And thank
Mm.
you. So now we can go ahead and we can do this project together. You've created some additional scope of work. They feel alleviated for something that they didn't even know burdened them. And I think if you can get that right by anticipating, and in digital, it happens all the time, and in simple ways, for example, when you're working on a website and the client doesn't know they need alt tags on all of their images, but you can then call them up and say, hey, we've gone to the liberty of going over all the sites, and as part of our package, we go and, we do all the alt tags and all of your images. Now you're selling yourself, you're selling your service, you're selling, why they should trust you, but also you anticipated something that they need that they don't know that they need. So you're playing that expert role and fulfilling that. So yeah, part of the relationship is also being able to anticipate what's coming next and the obstacles that your client might face so that you can help them kind of
Mm.
navigate those obstacles ahead of time.
Brandon, I don't know about you, man. So one of the things that I tend to have a problem with is when you deal with the gatekeepers, right? Or well, actually, like, I mean, there are times when you meet with someone who might be a recruiter, or who might be, they're not the actual decision makers. And so, I mean, I found that they actually make it quite difficult, because they don't sell you as better as you would do it yourself. And so there's something that I have done over the last few years, and that is to actually ask them, like, are you the ones that will be signing off on this project, or are there any stakeholders that needs to be involved, or be in this meeting? Because then, you're not going to waste your time. All right. And so I think it's always important to ask that question, like, are you the one that will be signing off on this project? Are there any ones that should be part of this project or part of this meeting that we should probably rope in? Because if you are not the ones, then it will probably be easier just to get all of them involved, all the stakeholders into this meeting. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think gatekeepers, to come back to the first one, is definitely chocolates and flowers as much as possible. No, I'm kidding. But, gatekeepers are hard, and you get them in all different forms. Sometimes the gatekeeper is the receptionist. Sometimes the gatekeeper is the CFO of the company who's holding the purse strings very tight. And, the CEO is convinced that they need this. Everyone on the team is behind it, but the CFO has the ears of the board, and sorry, you ain't going to get that sale. So I think it's also important, like you said, to know who are the stakeholders, but not just the stakeholders. What's the natural pecking order of the company that you're dealing with? Who are the real decision makers that are going to move your decision forward? And don't be afraid to speak price up front. If you're going to go into a negotiation, you need to know all the pieces of the puzzle and how they fit in, who you're dealing with, so that you can also make an informed decision. I think a part of the sale is early on in your career as a designer, you tend to sell yourself a lot, and you don't allow your client to sell themselves to you. That tilts later on in your career, and you see that with big designers, with big names and big agencies. The power is flipped in the sense that the pitch now is from the company to the agency to or the designer or the consultant, why they should be make their time available to invest in their company, because they've got a huge list of clients willing and knocking at their door that they need to spend time on. If I'm going to work with you, what is in this project for me? What is the creative benefit for me of working with you? What's that going to bring to my agency in terms of the dynamic and skill set that we want to grow? Because otherwise I don't want to take you on as a client. So there is the balance as you go through your career, where in the beginning you got to oversell yourself, and then that can kind of, where the client has to sell themselves to you. And so, yes, sell yourself to your client, but also allow themselves to sell themselves to you, so that you can see what they're selling and you know who all the decision makers are, so that you can make a deal in the middle. Sales is not just a one-sided thing. It never has been. It's transactional. And for a transaction to happen, there needs to be two people. So I think a lot of the times we think sales, I'm making the sale. Well, yes, you're making the sale, but the sale doesn't exist without the person making the purchase. So
Mm.
include your client in the sales process and allow them to sell you. Why should you work with them? And I think this is a dynamic often lost on young designers, especially. But as you get older, you realize, maybe I can also choose the type of clients that I work with, whether that be a niche, whether that be a size of client, temperament. Some people like hot-headed clients with short tempers. No, I'm kidding. No one likes that. But you know what I mean? You get to start choosing a little bit more as you get more seasoned in your career.
So what you are saying is that we should be, as designers, we should try and help the gatekeeper sell us better, right? So we should provide them with the necessary documents, the necessary quotations or proposals or something that will make it easier for them to sell, right? Because having
100%.
them on your side is kind of crucial. It's kind of important. But you were
Yeah,
talking about something very, very interesting just now, and that is the cost. That question: how much will it cost us for this project, right? And that is something I find like it's almost like that pressure is on you to give an amount there and then, right? I know a lot of designers will probably give an hourly rate or um, just give amount that they just comes to their head. But how do you deal with that? I've actually got something, but I just want to hear what you say.
it's often, I used to have little quick quirks and little comments lined up that you could quickly reply to the client to say, the typical "how long is a piece of string" type of reply. Um, but truthfully, I've actually found that the opposite. If I know what I want to sell to them, I already have an indication of cost. If they're selling me, then the cost is in their head. So I should know what I want from the deal before I go in. So if I know what I want from the deal, I know what I want. I know what I need to get paid. So what I'll normally do is then, if they ask me, I will tell them, this is what I want for this deal. And for me to be involved in this project, it'll cost you X. But that could increase based on the following, and then that could be at the following. But I would say it's probably going to cost you between 50 and 100, or between this and that. So I normally give them two ranges based on where I'm at. So the first range would be low level engagement on the scope. This is what I want, and this is what I could probably do. But if you want to go further for all, so basically I'll downplay it. So if they want the Rolls Royce, I'll say, I don't think you guys need the Rolls Royce. I think, we need to go a little bit lower. I'm prepared to meet you here. So, you don't want to just oversell either. And that also, yeah. So for me, it's about understanding what you want to get out of the deal, knowing the services and the value you can offer to the client, and not being afraid to say the number. And when you
Mm.
start getting confident in that number, the clients appreciate it, obviously, because then they know what you're talking about. There's a higher likelihood of closing that deal because you come across as a lot more confident. So that's not always
Yeah.
possible in digital. I mean, obviously, I'm using a very big use case, but in some cases in digital, we do need to go and investigate. There's sometimes things that just take time to figure out before we can give a conclusive answer. So in those cases, then I'll just say, I'm not sure. Let us get back to you. So, sometimes you do need to do that too.
Yeah, yeah. I have now on my website I have a form, right? And on the form, I usually have a budget range on there. And so the reason why I do that is because I know a lot of times we'll have a conversation with a client, and this thing is going to come up, like what is it going to cost us? And so
Mm-hmm.
I usually have this question that I ask, and that is, when you thought about reaching out to me regarding your project, you kind of had an idea of what working with me would cost more or less. Now, what kind of budget did you have in mind? And
Mm.
usually, what I'm by doing that, I'm trying to get them to say the number first. And I think in the past, and still even now, it helps a lot, because when I do a proposal, I already know what kind of budget they have in mind, and
Mm.
that helps me a lot. And then I know I'm more or less in the range that they are looking for, which is something that's been helping me with proposal writing for many years now. And I think it's super important, if as a designer you need to learn how to ask the right questions. Right, at the end
Yeah,
of the day, selling, it's just not about social media and about design or anything like that. It is actually understanding your client's pain points and trying to get to a situation where you can address those pain points in your proposal. And so maybe we'll do a another episode in the future about how to write better proposals.
that's
I
it.
know there's a lot of people
But I
like
mean, it's not
Jonathan
just.
Stark and
Oh, I mean, we must definitely do that.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
it's not also the sales side is, and like I said again, don't forget you want to get a transaction. I mean, the intention is to get money from their bank account into your bank account. So you want to do that correctly, and you want to do that in fair exchange, and when you want to do that in a way that adds as maximum amount of value to your client, so that you can get future business. But don't forget that the end result is a transaction and them sending money to you. And whatever you can
Mm,
do to make that process as seamless and simple as possible so that the client can send you money. So, how long does it take them from finding you to making the decision to send you money? And all those little stop gaps and touch points in between. That can get really complicated and quite almost like a maze of complications, especially if you're staying in within your own business and thinking about
mm,
what's good for you. That's normally when you see companies with sign up forms that are like 10 pages long because they're thinking about what they need for their admin process. And that just pushes away probably, a lot more sales than they could be. Where the opposite is true is you'll find registration forms or sign up pages or whatever where the process is super streamlined, and they'll find other ways to collect the information. Why? Because they want to prioritize that transaction. They want the least amount of friction in order to make that deal happen. So when you're looking at your sales, ask yourself, do I really need this? does the client really need this, or am I just doing this
Mm.
because it's a proposal I picked up from somewhere that I copied, and now everyone puts it in, and now I'm putting it in too? And maybe you don't need it. Maybe it's just an extra block of information that makes it harder for the client to make the decision, and harder for them to click that send money to Robert button. So yeah,
Yeah.
that would be my
Yeah.
closing bit of advice.
Awesome, awesome. And I think, I mean, this has been a very interesting topic. We could probably go on for hours, but just to keep this thing as short and valuable as possible. If there's anything else you want us to talk about, whether it be about, anything in your career that you are struggling with, just drop a comment in the down below, and we'll probably see it and try and accommodate you. So Brandon, thanks for joining me today, and yeah, go well.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, let's keep selling. We'll see you on the next episode.
Awesome.
Cheers, everyone.